All right, today we're diving into a real high-stakes economic drama. I mean, think about it. A single trade deal is basically all that's standing between a major nation and, well, total economic collapse. It's a fascinating story about a lifeline, but one that comes with some very heavy strings attached.
So, yeah, what is keeping this entire economy from just sinking? This is a question that policymakers in Islamabad are probably losing sleep over every single night. And for Pakistan, the answer isn't some fresh bailout or a lucky oil discovery. Nope. It's a very specific and highly conditional deal with Europe, a deal that pumps an absolutely staggering amount of money into its pretty fragile economy.
And when I say staggering, I mean 7.1 billion euros. That's the value of exports Pakistan sends to the EU every single year, all under this one special status. This isn't just some number on a screen, you guys. This is the economic lifeline that is literally keeping the country afloat. So what exactly is this arrangement?
Okay, so it's called GSP Plus, and the key thing to get here is that little phrase, in exchange for implementing international conventions. You gotta understand, this is not charity, not even close. It's a deal, a trade-off. The EU says, hey, we'll give you zero-duty access to our markets, which is a huge competitive advantage, but, they say, we demand some pretty profound changes in return.
And this metaphor right here really just hammers home how critical this deal is. I mean, when your economy is described as being on a ventilator, fighting tooth and nail to avoid default, dealing with all kinds of political instability, well, a deal like GSP Plus becomes everything. It's literally the oxygen keeping the patient alive. And the scale of this dependency, wow, it is truly mind-boggling when you actually see it. I mean, just look at this, it's staggering. Something like 90% of all of Pakistan's exports to the massive EU market fall under this one scheme. This is the absolute backbone of the country's textile and garment industry. We're talking an industry that employs millions of people. So the stakes here, they're not just economic, they're deeply social. And remember those strings I mentioned earlier? Well, there are a lot of them. So let's get into those strings attached to the deal because they are not minor details. We're talking about a list from the EU of 27 international conventions that Pakistan has to, and this is the important part, not just sign, but effectively implement. Right, so what's the catch? What are these conditions? Because believe me, we are not talking about simple trade regulations here. These conditions, they cut right to the very core of how a country governs itself, and frankly, how it treats its own citizens. Basically, those 27 conventions are all organized under these four main pillars. It's a super comprehensive framework, right? It covers everything from fundamental human rights and protecting workers, all the way to environmental standards and the rule of law. And the EU monitoring teams, they are really zeroing in on some particularly sensitive issues. And this is where the deal gets incredibly challenging. We're talking about deep-seated systemic problems that the EU has been raising concerns about again and again. Things like enforced disappearances, the super controversial blasphemy laws, the rights of minorities, and freedom of expression. The message coming from Brussels is, shall we say, direct and completely non-negotiable. Yeah, it really doesn't get much clearer than that, does it? This is a blunt, transactional ultimatum. The message is simple. The economic benefits are directly tied to tangible, verifiable progress on these core issues. And this creates a massive conflict between what's been promised on paper and the reality of what's happening on the ground. And that right there brings us to the central tension of this whole story. This huge gap between the promises Pakistan has made and the day-to-day reality of its implementation. See, this is the core of the problem. Technically, Pakistan checks the box. They've ratified all the treaties, they've passed some laws. But as one of our sources puts it so bluntly, making a law and implementing a law are two very, very different things. And the EU's monitoring teams, they're not just looking for paperwork, they're looking for real enforcement on the ground.
And here's the practical challenge, right? When a country is in pure survival mode, focused 100% on just avoiding economic default, these long-term, really difficult reforms on things like human rights, they just inevitably get pushed to the back burner. It's that classic case of the urgent crowding out the important. And that, of course, leads to a terrifying question. What happens if the EU finally decides that the progress just isn't enough?
Okay, let's really think about that. What if it's revoked? Let's explore those consequences. Because the impact, well, it would be catastrophic. It would set off a chain reaction that would be felt across the entire country. Yeah, we're not talking about a single event. It would be more like a catastrophic domino effect. And the very first domino to fall? A massive, immediate economic shock. That first domino is an annual trade loss of over $3 billion. Just poof, gone. Now, for an economy that is counting every single dollar of foreign reserves, that is an absolutely devastating blow. And here's the thing. That money wouldn't just disappear into thin air. It would flow directly to Pakistan's regional competitors. Think about it. Buyers of Pakistani textiles, say in Germany or the Netherlands, they would just switch suppliers. It's that simple. And you have countries like India and Bangladesh just waiting in the wings, ready to snap up that market share. That would shift the entire regional balance of economic power. But believe me, the fallout doesn't stop there. Because that massive economic shock, it would almost immediately translate into social and political chaos. Not being dramatic here, the very fabric of society would be threatened. Just think about the cascade, the dominoes falling one after another. First, you'd have large-scale layoffs in the textile industry. That leads to skyrocketing unemployment. Then you've got unemployed young people who can become easy targets for extremist ideologies, which makes internal security way worse. And on the world stage, it sends a crystal clear message that Pakistan is an unreliable partner, basically killing any hope of future foreign investment. It really is a nightmare scenario. So this all brings us to a final, really important point. This isn't just about a trade deal anymore. You can see how the GSP Plus status has morphed into something much, much bigger. And this metaphor that GSP Plus is a sword on whose edge Pakistan must walk, wow, that just perfectly captures the situation, doesn't it? It is an incredibly delicate, incredibly dangerous balancing act. On one side, you have connection to the modern world and economic survival. And on the other side, a steep fall into economic ruin and social chaos. And you can hear it in the background, the clock is ticking. Now, the EU has extended the status for now, but the monitoring is stricter than it has ever been, and the entire framework is set to expire in 2027. The pressure is absolutely immense, and the time for just passing laws on paper without any real implementation, that time is over. Which leads us to one final crucial takeaway from all this. Because ultimately, GSP Plus is so much more than just trade. It's a test. It's really the final litmus test. Can Pakistan make the difficult systemic changes needed to establish itself as a responsible nation, a reliable partner on the global stage? Seriously, the answer to that question, well, that's what's going to define its future for decades to come.